The Jackson family had been counting down the days to their Bahamas vacation for months. Tom and Nisha Jackson weren't just planning any trip. This was going to be their first real family vacation abroad with their two kids. Their daughter Mia, a curious 10-year-old with braided hair and bright eyes that sparkled whenever she talked about swimming with dolphins, had been researching facts about the Bahamas for her school project. Their son Theo, only 7 years old and obsessed with planes, had been building paper airplanes all week, throwing them around the house while making whooshing sounds. The morning of their flight, everyone woke up before the alarm even went off. Tom had barely slept anyway. As the family's unofficial travel manager, he had triple-checked their passports, printed all their boarding passes, and even packed snacks for everyone the night before. Nisha often teased him about his overplanning, but secretly appreciated how he always made sure things went smoothly. "Did you pack the sunscreen?" Nisha asked, zipping up the last suitcase while Theo bounced on the bed nearby. "2 bottles," Tom replied with a smile. "And I downloaded all the kids' favorite movies onto the tablets for the flight." They loaded up their minivan in the chilly morning air. It was still dark outside as they pulled out of their driveway in the Atlanta suburbs. Theo pressed his face against the window, looking for stars, while Mia sat with her travel journal, already documenting day 1 of their adventure. "How long till we're swimming in the ocean?" Theo asked, his voice full of that special kind of childhood excitement that makes even tired parents smile. "First the airport, then the airplane, then the hotel, then the ocean," Mia explained to her little brother with all the wisdom of an experienced 10-year-old traveler, even though this was her first time flying too. They arrived at Atlanta International Airport 3 hours early, just as Tom had planned. The parking garage was already filling up, but they found a spot not too far from the elevators. Tom unloaded their luggage onto a cart, while Nisha helped the kids put on their backpacks. "Remember what we talked about?" Nisha reminded the children as they walked toward the terminal. "Stay close, use inside voices, and if you need something, just ask." The airport was buzzing with early morning travelers. Business people with coffee cups rushing to gates, families like theirs trying to keep everyone together, airline staff directing traffic. The big departures board clicked and changed as they walked beneath it, showing hundreds of destinations around the world. "Look how many places people are going today." Maya pointed up, her eyes wide. The check-in line moved faster than they expected. Tom had already checked them in online, but they needed to drop their bags. When they reached the counter, the airline agent smiled at Theo's airplane t-shirt. "You must be my assistant pilot today," she said, handing him a set of plastic wings. Theo pinned them to his shirt immediately, standing a little taller. Security went smoothly too. Tom had packed everything carefully, following all the rules. They put their shoes and electronics in the bins, walked through the scanners, and collected their belongings on the other side without any issues. "Can we get breakfast?" Maya asked, spotting a cafe near their gate. With plenty of time before boarding, they found a table and ordered pancakes for the kids and coffee for the adults. Nisha pulled out her phone to take a picture of everyone together. "Our first vacation, Fergo," she said, as they all squeezed together, syrup-sticky smiles wide. Tom checked his watch and their boarding passes again. "We're boarding in about 40 minutes. Our seats are all together in the front section because of my work travel points." As they finished breakfast and made their way to the gate, Theo practiced his swimming by moving his arms in big circles, nearly bumping into other travelers. Nisha gently guided him to walk normally while Tom carried their carry-on bags. The gate area was filling up as they found seats near the boarding door. Maya took out a book while Theo pressed his face against the big windows, watching the plane's taxi on the runway. "That's our plane," he shouted, pointing to a big white jet being loaded with luggage. Little did they know that their perfect morning was about to take an unexpected turn. The Jackson family settled into their seats at the gate area, surrounded by other travelers waiting for the same flight to the Bahamas. Tom checked their boarding passes one more time. Their premium status would let them board in the first group, a perk from all his business trips over the past year. When they called Group 1, "That's us," he explained to the kids, who were busy watching a plane taxi to another gate. Just then, a woman walked into the waiting area. She wore a crisp white blouse tucked into designer jeans, with a bag that probably cost more than Tom's first car. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and large sunglasses sat on top of her head even though they were indoors. The way she walked, chin high, looking straight ahead, made it clear she thought she was important. As boarding time got closer, Tom guided his family to the priority line. They stood quietly, Theo still playing with his plastic wings from check-in, while Nisha helped Mia put her book away in her backpack. The woman with the designer bag appeared behind them, clearing her throat loudly. When no one moved, she tapped her manicured fingernail on her watch and sighed dramatically. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp like a teacher catching students breaking rules. "This line is for priority boarding only." Tom turned around, confused. "Yes, we know. We have priority boarding." The woman's eyebrows shot up as she looked the family up and down. The Jacksons weren't dressed in fancy clothes, just comfortable travel outfits perfect for a long flight with kids. Tom wore khaki shorts and a polo shirt. Nisha had on jeans and a simple blouse. The kids wore matching t-shirts with Bahamas Bound written across the front that Nisha had ordered online. "Are you sure you're in the right line?" the woman pressed, speaking slowly and loudly as if they couldn't understand English. "This is for first class and premium members." Her eyes darted to their casual clothes again. Nisha stepped forward, her face calm but her eyes hardening just a bit. "We understand exactly what this line is for," she said, her voice level. She pulled out their boarding passes. "We're Group 1, just like the sign says." The woman, whose designer name tag on her bag read Patricia, didn't back down. She moved a step closer, the smell of expensive perfume now impossible to miss. "Well, I've never seen you in the premium lounge before, and I fly this route monthly," Patricia said, as if that settled it. She glanced around, clearly looking for an airline employee to back her up. Theo tugged at his dad's sleeve. "Did we do something wrong?" he whispered, his earlier excitement fading as he sensed the tension. "No, buddy," Tom assured him, placing a protective hand on his son's shoulder. "We're exactly where we're supposed to be." Other travelers were starting to notice the exchange. An older man with reading glasses frowned over his newspaper. A young couple exchanged glances. A businesswoman typing on her laptop paused to watch. "I've been a platinum member for 8 years," Patricia continued, her voice getting louder. "And I know who belongs in this line." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The unspoken question hung in the air. What exactly did she mean by who belongs? Nisha took a deep breath. As a lawyer who had faced plenty of prejudice in courtrooms, she recognized what was happening. She turned to face Patricia directly, her voice calm but firm. "My husband travels for work almost weekly. We've earned our status just like anyone else here." Patricia's mouth tightened into a thin line. She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead crossed her arms and started tapping her foot rapidly on the floor. Just then, the gate agent's voice came over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready to begin boarding our flight to Nassau, Bahamas. We'll start with our Group 1 passengers, including premium members and families with small children." The moment of truth had arrived, and the Jacksons were about to find out if their premium boarding passes would be enough to get past Patricia's disapproving stare. The gate agent, a friendly-looking man with a neat beard and a name tag reading Kevin, started scanning boarding passes for Group 1. Tom led his family toward the gate, boarding passes in hand, with Patricia right behind them, practically breathing down their necks. "Ready for our beach adventure?" Tom asked the kids, trying to keep things light despite the uncomfortable situation. Maya nodded excitedly, but Theo kept glancing back at the angry woman behind them. When they reached Kevin at the gate, Tom handed over their 4 boarding passes altogether. "Welcome aboard. Jackson family, right?" Kevin said with a warm smile, scanning each pass. "You're in seats 5A through D, right in the front section. You folks enjoy those premium seats." Patricia's sharp intake of breath was audible to everyone nearby. Her face flushed red as Kevin confirmed what the Jacksons had been saying all along. "Have a wonderful flight," Kevin said, handing back their boarding passes and waving them through. As they walked down the jetway, Thea whispered loudly, "Dad, why was that lady so mad at us?" Tom exchanged a look with Nisha, their eyes communicating the same sad understanding. How do you explain prejudice to a 7-year-old? Some people make wrong guesses about others based on how they look. Tom said carefully. It's not fair, but it happens. Before they could say more, they heard a commotion behind them. Patricia's voice echoed down the jetway. Excuse me, I need to speak to a supervisor right now. The Jacksons continued onto the plane, being greeted by the flight attendant at the door. They found their seats, comfortable, wide chairs near the front with extra legroom. Maya and Theo took the window and middle seats in one row, with Tom and Nisha directly behind them. Look how big these seats are, Theo exclaimed, bouncing a little as he buckled his seatbelt. Nisha helped the kids get settled while Tom put their carry-ons in the overhead bins. Meanwhile, other passengers from Group 1 began boarding, many of them giving friendly nods to the family. An older couple stopped beside their row. Is this your first trip to the Bahamas? The woman asked kindly, clearly trying to make normal conversation after the uncomfortable scene at the gate. Yes, we're going to swim with dolphins, Maya answered, her earlier excitement returning. From the front of the plane, they could hear Patricia's voice getting louder. She had somehow made it onto the aircraft and was standing in the galley area, gesturing wildly as she spoke to Kevin and another airline employee with a supervisor badge. I'm telling you, there must be some mistake, Patricia insisted, loud enough for half the plane to hear. I fly this route every month for business. I've never seen those people in premium before. The supervisor, a composed black woman with braided hair pulled back into a bun, listened patiently before responding in a professional but firm tone. Ma'am, I've verified their boarding passes myself. The Jackson family has premium status through Mr. Jackson's frequent flyer miles. There's no mistake. Her voice was calm but left no room for argument. Now, may I please see your boarding pass so we can get you seated? Patricia reluctantly handed over her boarding pass, which the supervisor scanned with a handheld device. Thank you, Ms. Whitfield. You're in seat 23C, which will be boarding with Group 4 in approximately 15 minutes. I'll need to ask you to return to the gate area until your group is called. This is ridiculous, Patricia huffed. Do you know how much money I spend with this airline? Several passengers were now openly watching the drama unfold. A man in a business suit 2 rows ahead of the Jacksons didn't even try to hide his eye roll at Patricia's behavior. Meanwhile, Theo had pulled out the airplane safety card and was studying the diagrams intently, momentarily distracted from the situation. Nisha reached across the aisle to squeeze Tom's hand, both of them relieved that airline staff were handling the situation professionally. Mom, Maya whispered, leaning back to speak to Nisha, that lady doesn't seem very nice. Not everyone is having their best day, Nisha replied diplomatically. Let's focus on our trip instead. Little did they know that Patricia Whitfield wasn't done making a scene, not by a long shot. Patricia Whitfield stormed back to the gate area, her designer heels clicking loudly on the floor of the jetway. The other passengers in Group 1 continued boarding, many of them stealing glances at the Jackson family, who were trying their best to settle in normally despite the scene. Can I have the window on the way back? Theo asked his sister, completely unaware of how many people were now watching their family. We'll see, Tom said, helping both kids get their tablets and headphones ready for the flight. Just as things seemed to calm down, a commotion erupted at the front of the plane. Patricia had returned. Somehow she'd managed to get back on the jetway and was now standing at the entrance to the aircraft, her face flushed with anger. I demand to speak to the captain, she shouted, blocking other passengers from boarding. This is discrimination against loyal customers. The flight attendants exchanged concerned looks. One of them, a tall man with a kind face, approached Patricia. Ma'am, if you have concerns, I'd be happy to help you address them at the gate, he said calmly. Right now, you're delaying the boarding process for everyone. Patricia wasn't having it. She pulled out her phone and began recording. I'm documenting this whole incident. I've been flying this route monthly for years, and suddenly these people, she gestured wildly toward the Jackson family, get premium seats. Several passengers groaned. A businesswoman 3 rows behind the Jacksons whispered loudly to her seatmate, is she for real? The supervisor who had spoken to Patricia earlier appeared at the aircraft door. Ms. Whitfield, I need you to return to the gate area immediately, she said firmly. You're disrupting the boarding process. Do you know who I am? Patricia shot back, her voice rising. I'm a top-tier customer. The supervisor remained professional but unyielding. I understand you're a valued customer, but your behavior is violating our passenger code of conduct. If you cannot follow crew instructions, we'll need to discuss whether you can travel with us today. A hush fell over the front of the airplane. Even Mia and Theo stopped arranging their things to watch what was happening. Patricia seemed shocked that anyone would dare suggest she might not fly today. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice again. Are you threatening to remove me from this flight because I questioned why they have premium seats? Her voice dripped with indignation as she pointed directly at the Jackson family. That was the last straw for a gray-haired woman sitting across from the Jacksons. She stood up, her arthritis making the movement slow but deliberate. Young lady, she called out to Patricia, though they were clearly around the same age, what exactly is your problem with this lovely family? They've done nothing but mind their business, while you've been causing a scene for the last 20 minutes. Patricia blinked in surprise. This doesn't concern you, she said dismissively. It concerns everyone on this plane that you're delaying, the older woman continued. And we all see what's really happening here. She looked around, getting nods of agreement from several other passengers. By now, people had their phones out, some discreetly and others openly recording the scene. A younger man in business attire caught Tom's eye and mouthed sorry about this with a sympathetic shake of his head. Nisha leaned forward to make sure the kids were okay. Thea looked confused, while Mia seemed to understand more of what was happening, her young face showing a mixture of hurt and anger. Why is she so mad about us sitting here, Mom? Maya whispered. Before Nisha could answer, the captain emerged from the cockpit, his presence immediately commanding attention. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of someone who'd been flying planes for decades. What seems to be the problem here? He asked, his deep voice carrying through the cabin. Patricia immediately stepped toward him, clearly believing she'd found an ally. Captain, I've been trying to explain that there's been a mistake with the seating arrangements, she began, her tone suddenly much more reasonable. The other passengers watched in tense silence, wondering how this confrontation would end, and whether their flight to the Bahamas would leave on time, or at all. The captain listened patiently as Patricia explained her version of events, which seemed to grow more dramatic with each sentence. According to her, she was simply trying to maintain order when the Jackson family had somehow gotten special treatment. I fly this route every month, Patricia insisted, holding up her platinum frequent flyer card as if it were a badge of authority. I know all the regular premium passengers. The captain glanced over at the Jackson family, noting how Tom was trying to distract the children while Nisha sat with perfect posture, her face a careful mask of dignity despite the humiliating situation. Ma'am, the captain said, turning back to Patricia, our premium seats are available to any passenger who has earned the status or paid for the upgrade. The Jackson family has every right to be seated where they are. But Patricia started to argue. No buts, the captain cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. More importantly, your behavior is disrupting this flight and upsetting other passengers. By now, Group 2 was supposed to be boarding, but everyone was stuck waiting while this scene played out. The line of people in the jetway had grown, with many peering in to see what was causing the delay. A flight attendant approached and whispered something in the captain's ear. He nodded and turned his attention back to Patricia. Ms. Whitfield, I understand you're in seat 23C. You have two options at this point. You can return to the gate area, wait for your boarding group, and board without further disruption to this flight. Or, he paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in. Or we can arrange for you to take a later flight, as your current behavior suggests you may not be ready to fly with us today. Gasps and a few poorly hidden smiles spread through the cabin. The gray-haired woman who had spoken up earlier didn't bother hiding her approval, nodding firmly at the captain's words. Patricia's mouth fell open in shock. Are you threatening to remove me from this flight? She sputtered, her voice rising again. Do you have any idea how important my meeting in Nassau is? I'm not threatening anything, the captain replied evenly. I'm explaining the consequences of continuing to disrupt our boarding process and harass other passengers. The word harass seemed to hit Patricia like a bucket of cold water. For perhaps the first time she looked around and noticed just how many people were watching and recording her behavior. Several phones were pointed in her direction, their camera lenses like unblinking eyes capturing her every word and gesture. An older man in a Hawaiian shirt called out from his seat, "Lady, just let us get on with our vacations." This brought a ripple of agreement from other passengers. The public opinion in the cabin had clearly turned against Patricia, and she was suddenly very aware of it. In the Jackson family's row, Theo had finally caught on to the gravity of the situation. His lower lip trembled slightly as he whispered to his sister, "Are we in trouble?" Mia, wise beyond 10 years, shook her head. "We didn't do anything wrong," she said firmly, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "That lady is being mean for no reason." Her innocent but accurate assessment brought sympathetic looks from those around them, including a flight attendant who gave her a subtle thumbs up. Patricia's face flushed deeper as she heard the little girl's words. For a brief moment, something flickered across her features, perhaps the first glimmer of embarrassment or self-awareness since the whole incident began. The supervisor who had been dealing with Patricia stepped forward again. "Ms. Whitfield, we need your decision now. Other passengers are waiting to board." The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone waited to see what Patricia would do next. Would she back down and take a proper seat when her group was called? Or would her pride push her to make an even bigger scene? Tom reached across the aisle and took Nisha's hand, both of them watching carefully, ready to shield their children if things escalated further. The family that had simply wanted to start their vacation was now at the center of a drama that none of them had asked for. The entire plane seemed to hold its breath, waiting for Patricia's next move. Patricia stood frozen for a moment, her eyes darting between the captain, the supervisor, and the many passengers watching her. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. This wasn't going her way at all, and worse, dozens of people were recording everything on their phones. She began, her voice suddenly much smaller. "I don't want to miss my flight." The captain nodded. "Then I'll need your assurance that you'll take your assigned seat when your group is called and cause no further disruptions. Can you do that?" Patricia's shoulders slumped slightly. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. "Wonderful," the captain replied. "Please return to the gate area and wait for Group 4 to be called." As Patricia turned to leave, the supervisor added, "And Ms. Whitfield, I'd also like you to apologize to the Jackson family before you go." A hush fell over the cabin. This was the moment of truth. Would Patricia actually apologize? She turned slowly toward the Jackson family. Tom and Nisha looked back at her steadily, neither hostile nor welcoming, simply waiting. The children watched with wide eyes. Patricia cleared her throat. "I'm sorry for the confusion," she said stiffly, not quite meeting their eyes. It wasn't much of an apology, but before anyone could point this out, another passenger spoke up. It was a middle-aged woman seated a few rows back. "Confusion," she echoed incredulously. "There was no confusion. You assumed they didn't belong here because of how they look. Just say it." Several passengers nodded in agreement. Patricia's face flushed deeper. The captain stepped in. "Let's get this flight back on track. Ms. Whitfield, please return to the gate area now." As Patricia finally retreated down the jetway, a spontaneous burst of applause broke out in the cabin. The tension that had been building suddenly released, and several people called out words of support to the Jackson family. "Don't let her ruin your vacation. You handled that with such grace. Your kids are adorable." Tom and Nisha thanked them with smiles and nods, clearly uncomfortable being the center of attention but appreciative of the support. The supervisor stepped forward again. "On behalf of the airline, I want to apologize for that unpleasant experience. This kind of behavior is not acceptable on our flights." She turned specifically to Mia and Theo. "I heard you're going to swim with dolphins in the Bahamas." Theo nodded eagerly, his earlier worry forgotten. "And sea stingrays too." The supervisor smiled. "Well, we have a small gift for you both." She reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 small packages of wing pins like the ones junior pilots receive, but these were special gold-colored ones usually reserved for VIPs. "These are our special navigator pins," she explained, handing them to the children. "Only our most important travelers get these." Mia and Theo beamed as they pinned them to their shirts. The simple gesture had transformed an ugly moment into something positive, at least for the children. The boarding process resumed, with the gate agent calling for remaining Group 1 and then Group 2 passengers. The Jackson family settled back into their seats, the initial excitement of their vacation slowly returning. A flight attendant stopped by their row with a discreet message. "The captain would like to invite the children to visit the cockpit after we land in Nassau, if that's okay with you." Tom smiled gratefully. "They would love that, thank you." As the plane filled with the remaining passengers, the Jacksons noticed people giving them supportive nods or kind smiles as they passed. A woman across the aisle leaned over. "You know, my daughter experienced something similar last month at a restaurant," she said quietly to Nisha. "It's 2025, and some people still can't see past skin color. You handled it beautifully." Nisha thanked her with a warm smile. What had started as an awful encounter was turning into something unexpected, a moment of community among strangers standing against injustice. When Group 4 was finally called for boarding, everyone in the premium section tensed slightly, wondering if Patricia would cause another scene. She boarded with her group, eyes down, and hurried past the Jackson family to her seat in the back without looking at anyone. As the final passengers found their seats and the doors were closed for departure, Tom leaned over to Nisha. "Well, that wasn't how I expected our vacation to start," he whispered. The rest of the flight to the Bahamas went smoothly. The Jackson family enjoyed their premium seats, with Theo and Mia especially thrilled by the extra snacks and the special attention from the flight attendants. Every now and then, a passenger would stop by their row on the way to the bathroom just to offer a kind word or share a similar story. "My kids are grown now," said one older gentleman, "but I remember a time at a water park when someone asked if they were really mine because we don't look alike. People can be so thoughtless." When the plane finally touched down in Nassau, the passengers broke into applause, partly for the smooth landing, but it felt like something more. A shared sense of having witnessed something important and standing on the right side of it. As promised, the captain invited Theo and Mia to visit the cockpit while the other passengers deplaned. The children's eyes went wide at all the buttons, screens, and controls. "This is where the magic happens," the captain explained, letting Theo sit in the co-pilot's seat. "It takes years of training to learn how to fly this plane." "Even longer than it takes to learn to be kind?" Maya asked innocently. The captain smiled. "That's a lesson some people never learn, unfortunately." When the Jackson family finally made their way through the terminal and out into the warm Bahamian sunshine, the incident on the plane already felt like it was fading into the background. The bright blue sky, swaying palm trees, and salty ocean breeze were exactly what they had been dreaming of for months. But the story wasn't quite over yet. That evening, as they were enjoying dinner at their hotel restaurant, Tom's phone began buzzing with notifications. A college friend had texted, "Is this you guys?" with a link to a video. Tom clicked on it and nearly dropped his phone. There on the screen was their family, standing in the premium boarding line while Patricia argued with them. The video, titled "Entitled Woman Harasses Black Family, Gets Reality Check at Airport," already had over 50,000 views. "Oh my goodness," Nisha whispered, looking over his shoulder. Someone posted it. They watched in stunned silence as the scene played out, the confrontation, the captain's intervention, and Patricia's grudging apology. The comments section was filled with supportive messages and people sharing similar experiences. "Should we be upset about this?" Tom asked, looking concerned. Nisha thought for a moment. "You know, maybe not. Nothing in that video shows us in a bad light. If anything, it might help someone else who faces something similar." Later that night, after the kids were asleep in the adjoining room of their suite, Tom and Nisha sat on their balcony overlooking the ocean, talking about the day's events. "I'm proud of how we handled it," Tom said. "And I'm proud of the kids too. They saw something ugly, but they also saw people stand up against it." "It's a tough lesson," Nisha agreed. "But maybe an important one. The world isn't perfect, but there are more good people than bad." The next morning at breakfast, a family at a nearby table approached them hesitantly. "I'm sorry to bother you," the mother said, "but we saw the video of what happened on your flight. We just wanted to say how sorry we are that happened to you, and how impressed we were with how you handled it." Word had spread around the resort. Throughout their vacation, the Jacksons received small kindnesses from strangers, a free round of virgin pina coladas for the kids, a complimentary boat tour, friendly waves from people who recognized them. On their last day in the Bahamas, as they built sandcastles on the beach, Theo looked up at his parents. "Remember that angry lady at the airport?" he asked. "Yes, buddy," Tom replied cautiously. "I feel sad for her," Theo said, patting the top of his sandcastle. She was so mad she couldn't see how beautiful the world is. Nisha's eyes met Tom's over their son's head. Sometimes the simplest wisdom comes from the youngest hearts. A week after they returned home, the airline sent them a formal letter of apology along with vouchers for their next trip. But more meaningful was the note saying that their incident was now being used in the company's customer service training as an example of how to handle discrimination. What began as an ugly moment had transformed into something powerful, a teaching tool, a viral reminder about human decency, and for the Jackson family, an unexpected lesson in how good can emerge from difficult situations. Next time, Tom said as they pinned the children's gold navigator wings to their vacation memory board, "Our adventure will hopefully start with less drama." "But just as much heart," Nisha added with a smile.